Alrighty, this is our debut podcast. My name is Jared Wilson. I'm with Resilient Living, and my friend Ryan Steva is here, the Homestead consultant.
Hey, everybody.
Alrighty, so on our first podcast, we want to talk about potential mistakes that may happen in homesteading. So if we jump right on in.
Yeah, I'm calling this "Don't Make These Eight Homestead Mistakes." So I kind of wrote down my top eight, and we're going to talk through them a bit. My first one that I've talked about before, and I think is really pertinent to most homesteaders, and it's the one that I see homesteaders make the most, is taking on too many tasks or animals at a given time. So generally, you see people wanting to get into homesteading, and they are really gung ho about doing all the things, and they take on too much, and it basically drowns them. So I like to use the analogy of debt. When you take on debt to do something, sometimes that can be okay to get something started like a business, but you don't want to start 10 businesses at once. You want to start one business at once. So I recommend the same thing for people trying to get started with, animals or get
Sure,
started with projects.
that makes sense. Is there a particular subset that you would recommend as a first step?
Yeah, absolutely. So garden and chickens are almost always it's like the go-to thing to
Right.
try. One, because they tie together so well, and two,
Sure.
because they're easy. And then I'd say three, because people love chickens. They're entertaining to watch. They just bring joy to your life, and eggs plus all the things you need to make an omelet plus um, great vegetables and things that are way better than anything you can buy in the store. That all goes well together. Chickens make compost. Garden needs compost. Garden makes waste that goes to the chickens. It's just a cyclical system that's fairly easy to understand, easy to get lots of information on, and easy to get started on. So basically, in this case, you're starting one system that has two components to it.
Sure. So it sounds like you recommend egg chickens as opposed to meat birds?
Yes. Yeah. So typically, meat birds are, that may be the next step in your iteration, because there's similarities in brooding them out. And that can be a way towards meat and towards more resilience on your homestead and learning the next skill. The other nice thing about meat chickens is they're short term. So if you want to go on vacation or leave your homestead or pare down, meat chickens, if you're doing Cornish cross, are 8 weeks. If you're doing other varieties, it's anywhere from 10 to 16 weeks, and you're done. You've processed them, they're in your freezer, and you don't have to worry about them anymore. So it's like a short term project, and you get to experiment with it, try it out. And if it goes poorly, you know, don't do it again, make the tweaks you need to. Whatever you want to do, you're not long term committed to it. So, yeah,
Sure.
meat chickens would be after the egg layers. I think egg layers are really the place to start, though.
Do you have any thoughts on ratio of chickens to people in your household?
Um, it really more comes down to how many eggs you want to eat. And I generally say you want one chicken. One chicken will lay, average it out to about 4 to 5 eggs a week. And um, I know that the first year, especially with higher production birds, you will get one egg a day pretty much for the whole first year. But that will slow down, and you'll have times where they're molting or not producing eggs. So having a few extra isn't going to hurt, and nobody's going to get mad at you for giving them eggs. So I'd err towards having more. And also, once you have your own farm fresh eggs, you're probably going to start eating more than you did in the past as well, or finding more dishes to put them in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They are delicious.
So when are you getting chickens, Jared?
Oh, as soon as getting the business up and going has been so time consuming
Yeah.
that it's been put everything else on the back burner. And so, okay, going back to the garden, I don't have a very green thumb. Um, I've done peppers and tomatoes and pumpkins, some other squash, and I've done okay at it, but I don't have the greenest of them. So, what are your thoughts on good um, entry level gardening?
Yeah. So I'm always a fan of in-ground gardening when you can, and a lot of people who think they can't can. For example, my ground was red, very thick, very dense clay when I got on my property, and by just simply getting horse manure, so let's say I started with yeah, it's horse manure. Then on top of that, I put a layer of cardboard. Then on top of that, wood chips, and I literally just cut some holes in the cardboard and put my first year's crop in. So we got seedlings from a nursery, and those did quite well. By the next year, all of that had broken down, and we had a few inches of good organic matter. We kept putting mulch on top and just wood chips on top year after year, putting about 6 inches on each year, and that would
Oh
break
wow,
down. And that encourages things like nematodes and worms and other soil life and soil activity, as well as consistent moisture. And they'll come up and grab that new organic matter and bring it down, tunnel it in, poop it out, as well as keeping roots in the soil will help a lot. And what ends up happening is that soil just keeps getting deeper and deeper. It's not that it's growing necessarily, it actually just moves down into that clay. And
sure,
so anytime you can, it's way cheaper and way better as far as nutrient density of food to start with to grow in the ground where you can. Now there's places where that doesn't make sense and there's reasons not to do that, but that's my general recommendation. And I generally say if you can start in the fall, put down cardboard, put down compost if you can get your hands on it, but mostly put down large amounts of mulch. And my favorite is wood mulch or wood chips specifically, because of the way that they break down and because of the high mineral density, as well as their ability to move water. If water is needed down in the soil, they'll actually pull that water down into the soil from things like dew, even if you don't
sure,
have rain, and vice versa when there's too much. So I generally like to recommend starting in the fall if you can, let that sit over the winter, and then start using it in the spring after it's killed off all the grass and things underground or underneath
sure.
the cover. So that's my typical recommendation if it
Well, and
works
I
for
like that because that's applicable whether you're in a semi-urban environment or out in the country like we live.
you. Yeah.
Because yeah, you can take a small patch of grass and, like you said, cover it over and start growing real food.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, even people in the city, if they have just even a tiny little plot, can do this. And so I really like it for that. In some cases, if you've got really restricted space, using some type of raised bed where you can bring in soil makes sense because you're going to focus on um, extremely condensed growing and growing that way as opposed to spreading out a little more because you have more space. So um, paying for the soil and getting it up and going more quickly tends to make a little bit more sense in that case.
Sure. Well, and then so that kind of leads into your second point there of fine tuning is what worked? Why did it
Right.
work? Why did it not work? And really honing that in.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, and we'll talk a little later, I think, about troubleshooting, or maybe we can just dive into it here. But
I'm fine with it.
learning how to troubleshoot and figure out some of the subtle differences and kind of using that scientific method of creating a hypothesis and then testing that hypothesis and trying to break the hypothesis will oftentimes lead you to the answer that you need to make
Sure.
things better.
So what's some an example in your um homestead that you've
Yeah.
used?
Well, I will tell you my biggest homestead failure ever, and that was my first attempt at a garden. So, um, I had a major health issue and realized I needed to make some major changes in my life diet wise, which got me realizing that our whole food system and medical system was broken. And so I was like, I've got to plant a garden. And my wife showed me, this was back when, what was it, Pinterest? Yeah, it was Pinterest. It was
Oh,
really
okay.
popular. So
Yeah, yeah.
like 12 years ago or something. And she shows me this pallet garden. It's called, pallet garden, and it's a
All right.
vertical pallet that
Yep.
you basically enclose and you stick dirt in it, and that's supposed to be your little garden. And you lean it up against the south side of your house. It should work great, right? Well, we try it, and what I eventually realized is we had pepper plants that got about that tall and stopped growing. Same with
Oh.
our tomato plants, same with our pea plants. Everything basically yellowed out. And I'm like, what is, start asking questions. What does yellow mean in my plants? Why does it stop growing? And the answer is, generally speaking, it's because there's no nitrogen. Like,
Mm,
well, why wouldn't I have nitrogen? I bought soil with nitrogen in it.
sure.
And so I'm like, oh, it's touching wood. Every single side is touching wood, and wood
Ooh.
robs nitrogen until it breaks down. So, I kind of went through this of process of elimination, realized that what these people were doing on Pinterest was taking full-size pepper plants, sticking them in the pallet garden, making them look really nice, taking a picture and claiming it was their garden. And so, unfortunately that year that was the garden I had. I made a mistake and I had to fix it. But what it did was it pushed me into thinking about, what does gardening really mean? Really digging into what makes a healthy plant, because it's not miracle grow. A diseased plant is not a deficiency of miracle grow. And so then that kind of got the ball rolling for me, to research things and to actually understand the why. And once I understood the why, then I could kind of build from there.
Sure. And that is going back to your Instagram and YouTube. It is the content is prolific and it looks so beautiful and and the promises are they're lies. Not all of them, but there's a
Yeah, most
lot
of
of
them.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of deception, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Homesteading and gardening and animal husbandry, it's not as pretty as Instagram makes it look,
No. And I often say chickens shouldn't stink, or chickens should never stink.
right?
However, what that doesn't necessarily carry with it is sometimes they will, especially when you're getting started and figuring things out. So not everything's going to be perfect. And those Instagrammers and YouTubers should probably flip the camera around and show you what's behind them. Just like if I pulled down this curtain right now, you would see a somewhat dilapidated camper rather than, a black curtain behind me. And because when you're a homesteader and when you're living this lifestyle, there's a certain amount of, you know, sacrifice you need to make to actually make things work and not spend a small fortune or reasonably sized fortune
Right.
getting going. And you have to figure out how to make things work with what you have. And in my case, my studio is a camper. That's my house isn't big. I don't have space for a studio in the house.
It
So
works.
yeah, and if I went and gave you a property tour, you'd say it's really beautiful, but there's one spot where if I pointed the camera at it, you'd be like, that's a lot of junk. And most of it is junk, but a lot of it's very useful. It's like
Yeah.
there's a pile of fencing. Well, it doesn't look very nice. At least it's over in
But
one
when you
corner,
need to
kind of
fence
behind some
something, you
trees.
do. Yeah.
Exactly. So realistically, every homesteader, at least every homesteader who isn't independently wealthy, is going to have a pile of materials sitting there. And that's both for preparedness as well as financial feasibility. Because if you don't have a fence, or you don't have the fence to put in and you need it, or the fencing materials to fix a fence sitting there, now you have to run to the store and buy it. What if the store's out? What if the store's too far away? What if you need it immediately? So there's a practical side to it, and there's a fiscal side to it as well. And the YouTube and Instagram homesteaders, another thing I find is they never follow up on something that's a bad idea, right?
Mm,
So I'm not saying electroculture is a bad idea. It may have its place, which electroculture, for those who don't know, is you make a copper coil antenna and you stick it in the ground. And there's some science that could say it might be beneficial, right? So I started looking into it because I have people constantly asking me,
yep.
should I could do electroculture and everything's going to grow great, right? I'm like, I, I've never tried it. Let's try it. So I started trying to look into it, and everybody who was showing me their electroculture on YouTube was saying how they're going to do this follow up video and everything was going to be huge. And there's never a follow up video,
Ah,
right? Because you're going to, even if electroculture is a great option and it actually does something, you're going to have a lot more benefit by improving your soil, improving your moisture holding and microbe holding ability of the soil. Things like that
oh,
are going to
sure.
have a much larger impact than the electroculture will. So that's another thing, is a lot of people are doing things and showing things. Sometimes it's just a flat out lie, like the pepper plants that I thought were going to grow in my pallet garden that looked so
Right.
good. Sometimes it's kind of a lie of omission where they try something, show you how they're doing it, but don't actually show you the results. So there's a lot of things to kind of parse out. And as you learn troubleshooting and as you learn that scientific method, kind of applying it to your homestead, you'll also really you'll grow your BS meter. You'll start to see the things that are BS, and you'll be able to understand that maybe Justin Rhodes, who's in Virginia, his methods aren't going to work as well when you're in New Mexico, right? Like, it works great where he is, but it's
Yep.
not going to work there. And
Right.
that's one of the big comments I get on my YouTube channel is, "Oh, that won't work here." And a lot of times the actual answer is, yes, it will, with a couple of little tweaks.
Sure.
And sometimes the answer is no, and I didn't design that system for your climate. But um, it's funny that people oftentimes can't adapt something, and can't see the difference of how it might work in one climate or zone or
Sure.
whatever in another.
And I can, to some extent, get behind it. It's hard to look outside of your own bubble
Mhm.
sometimes. You get trapped in, well, this is the way it works for me, so therefore it must work like that for everybody else. Like, well,
Right.
actually, no.
Yeah, and it doesn't, and it is hard to sometimes see the forest for the trees, and it can be easy to be a keyboard warrior as well. Um,
Yes, and there are a lot, especially in this topic, it seems there are a lot of those.
yep. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that and understanding the subtleties of systems and being able to tweak them, that's definitely something that I have experience on the mechanical side of things.
Mhm.
It's tweaking my brain to try to, like, how do I apply those same thought processes to, what you're talking about, where we got animals or we got, plants.
Yeah,
So that's good.
exactly. Yeah, and that's a good point, in that one of my points was failing to understand subtleties is one of the biggest mistakes that I see homesteaders make. Um, not being able to make that little tweak to make it work for them, or following instructions but missing one of the instructions because they didn't understand the importance of that specific thing. Um, let's say you're making a wicking or self-watering bed, and you don't understand the importance of the specific height of the drain, or the importance of leaving a cavity in certain areas so that the water wicks up into that garden properly. If you don't understand those subtleties, it can be really easy to build this whole thing, spend a lot of time and money on it, and have it not work right because of that. One of the examples that I love to throw out there for this, to help people envision it, is if you go out and talk with a cattle farmer and you tell him that he should plant trees in his pasture, he he will probably throw a fit or just laugh at you,
Right.
because what he envisions and what he has seen is you plant a tree in a pasture with cattle in it. All the cattle flock to that tree. They kill all the grass. They make a mud pit. They destroy it. And the tree is unhealthy. The cattle are unhealthy. Flies are everywhere.
Yep.
It's a disaster,
Yep.
right? But there's subtleties he's missing, because if you put out multiple, like a whole bunch of trees, now it's not just one tree. So the cattle don't just go to the one tree over
Sure.
and over every day, making a mud pit, destroying the grass, all that. Um, Also, if you implement rotational grazing, so you're moving the cattle consistently, they can't go back to that same tree constantly. And so, in an environment like ours here in Tennessee, it gets really hot and sometimes really dry, especially near the end of the summer. And the cattle start running out of grass, and you need to start bringing in hay, even though it's not winter. And if
Right.
you have trees, now you're actually changing the hydrological cycle of the ground because the trees have deep roots where they can start pulling up moisture and putting that down on the grass in the morning as dew. Um, as well as, I mean, there's other things with the dew cycle and things, but that's one thing that happens. Or they just bring up water into, they're like these amazing biological solar powered water pumps are what trees are. It's
Yes.
incredible.
Yes.
And so now that grass is getting water and it's actually staying greener through the summer, and the sun is only hitting it for half the day. So it actually balances out. You get a little less growth in the spring, a little more growth in the late summer, and you have a healthier pasture overall. And so when you tell a cattle farmer you should plant trees in your pasture, he's because he doesn't necessarily, or some are very smart and get it, but most are going to fail to see the subtleties of the design and think about it wrong. And so they'll think it's a stupid idea or that it couldn't work. And I see
Sure.
that a lot when people fail to see the subtleties of a design to make sure that it works right.
Sure. That make yeah, I can anytime I've learned anything new, I completely glossed over the nuance,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's learning an instrument, learning a new technology, whatever it may be. It's really easy because you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. Yep.
Hmm.
And just digging into that. And we were talking a little bit before about, climates, and a really cool technology that people have come up with is something called the first flush system. And for those who haven't run across it before, basically it's um, a tube on a water collection system off of a roof that fills up first. So it holds all the gunk from the roof and flushes that out. Well, those first flush systems have kind of an inherent flaw, and that's that first flush system drains slowly through a small hole that essentially allows that water to drain out over time. But because that tank is intended to catch debris from the roof, that gets clogged. The pipe tends to stay filled with water without constant maintenance. And if you're not, or even if it's due in the morning, or like water melting off of a roof in the winter, that can fill that pipe and then freeze, and then go
Ooh.
overnight. And so the first flush system is really designed for subtropical and tropical regions, but
Ah.
became popular because it was clever, it was a good example of design. And so people are putting them in here in Tennessee, and if they're not really on it with maintenance, uh, it freezes. If you put it in Wisconsin, you're even worse off.
Oh
it's
yeah.
it's
That would
really
not
bad. So understanding what something is designed for, and the first flush system really isn't great to be modified for a colder climate, but there's other options and other solutions. So,
sure.
recognizing that and starting to figure those things out and troubleshoot and put all those methods together can really save you a lot of time, effort, and money down the road.
Sure. That makes sense. And that's my my biggest struggle is I want it all now and perfect. And
Right.
so I struggle badly with you had a phrase for it where I can't even get started because it's not
Analysis
perfect.
paralysis.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yep.
I'm sitting there like just racking my brain like I got to figure this out. I've got to get just absolutely nailed down and then
Right.
but I never start. And so
Yeah.
I'm yeah,
Yeah. It's a common thing. It's actually super common, especially for people like you and I who tend to like overanalyze things and really love to think through things and figure things out.
yeah.
Um, there's another term. It's a slightly different concept, but a similar concept called the toolbox fallacy.
Okay.
And the idea is I can't get started until I have everything in place before I get started.
Oh, yes.
And so it's a fallacy that has truth in it, but it takes it too far. So you shouldn't get chickens until you have a brooder and a coop set up for them. But you also don't need everything perfectly dialed in and figured out, the perfect feeder. Get them a feeder and water that suck, deal with it for a little while,
Right.
and then figure out what the right one is once you've watched chickens and you understand how they behave. Don't go buy the $300 feeder right off the bat. And so the toolbox fallacy is this idea that you need everything before you can get started, so you never get started.
Sure.
And then there's analysis paralysis, where you think about something until you do it. Kind of like our podcast today. We've been thinking about this for quite a while,
Yes, we
and
have.
this is not a perfect podcast, and
Nope.
we didn't expect it to be, but we had to go out and do it at some point. And
Yeah,
the next one hopefully will be better, and the
that's
next
right.
one after that should be better as well. So
We learn and
yeah,
we
there's
grow.
there's a value in just getting started.
Absolutely. Uh, absolutely. That's the probably one of the most powerful things you can do is just get started. I mean, what's the old Chinese adage? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best
Mhm.
time is today.
Right. And again, thinking about subtleties, realize that today is probably not the best day to plant 300 trees that cost you your entire life savings, and you don't have
Valid.
a watering system set up to keep alive.
Yes.
Right. So there's nuance, there's balance, keep that in mind. But yeah, absolutely, if you're somebody who struggles um, with analysis paralysis or toolbox fallacy or whatever else, there's value in, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. Maybe it starts with the second step, because the first step you're 1 foot still in the same place.
Right.
um so yeah, there's huge value in getting started, but don't, balance that with, don't take on too many things too quickly.
Yeah. Well, and don't try to make your homestead look like somebody else's. It's yours.
Mm-hmm.
You have a particular skill set and a background that so you're going to have a unique type of a homestead versus mine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, now ours probably fairly similar, but then there's other people who maybe they're beekeepers or maybe they're really good woodworkers, and then like everybody, a homestead is not a specific thing. It's a mindset, an approach to life.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think each person is going to need to figure out their niche, and make sure not to fall into the trap of thinking that they're going to do everything, provide everything for themselves. That never really works. You're never going to be fully self-sufficient. And I don't think God designed us to be fully self-sufficient. We're supposed to be in community with others. We're supposed to rely on others, and actually learn how to cooperate, um,
Yes.
through voluntary association, figuring out how to mutually benefit each other.
Yeah.
And if we don't, we're just some hermit who lives out in the woods, pretty much, is about the. And even now you can't do that, because you have to pay property taxes and you have to come up with that money somewhere. So
Right.
um
Well,
unless you're living
that's
on
like my
federal land.
favorite aspect of the business that I've started is being able to have that exact conversation of, look, yeah, I have a background in metalworking and medical technologies and all these weird things, but because I don't have a green thumb, I'm gonna lean on the people who do.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't have a background in animal husbandry, I'm gonna lean on people who do. Now I can provide them with metalwork. I can provide them with, I can fabricate just about anything. Um, so I can provide something to them, but like you just said, it comes back to community. It's not
Right.
about this lone wolf. I mean, I unfortunately I see too many people in the prepper community that it's like they've seen too many apocalypse movies,
Yeah.
and they're like, "Oh well, if I'm just prepared enough, I'll be fine." I'm like, well, that gets you through the apocalypse. It's after the apocalypse. Like, what
Mm-hmm.
happens after the closing scene of the movie? That's where what we're talking about really hits the road. It's living life.
Right. Yeah, I think you're kind of talking about, like, they call it prepper porn, where it's
Yeah,
you get really focused on one thing, like, I'm going to have all the guns, or I'm going to have 25 years of food storage.
right.
Um,
But it's all
but
rice and beans.
right, okay, you're gonna live on rice and beans, and not want to live anymore after
Yeah,
about a
give
month
3
of that.
months.
Yeah,
You're done. Even
right.
with a good herb garden, you're still done.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody wants to live without meat.
Oh, gosh,
Eh,
no.
I'm not apologizing to the vegans out there, by the
Nope.
way.
Sorry. Love you
I
guys,
love
but nope.
plenty of vegans I love, but I don't get it personally. Anyways, um, yeah, I think we can get focused on what we think is going to be the end of the world and plan and prepare for that, and then it doesn't happen. Um, I unfortunately had the unfortunate experience of helping a lady clean out her house. This was probably 6 or 7 years ago, and she had spent enormous amounts of money, could no longer afford to live in her house because she had prepared so over prepared for Y2K.
Oh,
And we were pulling out when I was pulling out like lamps. So she had, the layman's lamps that you can buy, the
yep.
forget what they're called even. I personally don't have any. But she
Yeah.
had boxes and boxes, probably between 30 and 50 of these lamps.
Oh, no.
And she had 3 gallons of oil. It wouldn't even get all of the lamps through one night. And so
No.
when we prepare out of fear instead of out of hope, and instead of out of logic and reason and trying to prepare for the most likely scenario, which is more like, power's out for a week and a half because
Yeah,
of an ice storm, um, we really end up making bad decisions.
absolutely.
So, have you talked to any people who have had horror stories, or have you come across anything like that?
I definitely it's a tricky one to feel somebody out during a conversation like, that people who are more of the preparedness mindset, we've had some really good conversations, and I usually steer it back to that community approach of like, "Awesome, you're prepared, that's fantastic." You're bringing, all these different things to the table for us as a community to become resilient. It's not just about you lone wolf surviving, it's about us as, here, Middle Tennessee, surviving whatever, whether
Right.
it's a downed tree that's blocking the road, whether it's a, like you said, ice storm that, results in power failures or, a contaminated water system that, is poisoning you slowly from the inside out. Um, it's we as a community are only as resilient as the individuals. And so we as a community got to work on that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And, on the note of falling prey to that um 100% self-sufficiency thing,
Mm,
there is a rule. I think there's a better name for it, but it's something to the extent of the 80/20 rule.
okay.
And so when you're taking on a project or taking something on, getting 80% of the way to the finish line is oftentimes, 20% of the effort. And
Oh,
that
yeah, yeah, yeah.
last 20% of the getting to the finish line is is the rest of that, 80% of the effort. And so if you can manage to finish, finish what you're or do most of what you need to in that 80%,
Right.
then, if you're 80% prepared for a power outage, well, you might want to get 100% prepared for it. But if you're producing 80% of your food and that last 20% basically takes the entire rest of your uh, day every single day to do, it may not be worth it. Work with somebody else who, might be producing meat that you want
Oh,
while you
yeah.
produce vegetables, or, maybe you produce honey. You produce something that you can trade for that other thing rather than trying to produce 100% of the things and 100% of everything you eat. Um,
Absolutely.
so, and also just whittling away at it. Right now, I'd say we maybe produce about 30% of what we eat.
Which is
Maybe just,
a substantial, impact financially is
yep,
in your life, quality. That's phenomenal.
exactly. And we could probably ramp that up if things went really badly. I can breed rabbits, or,
Sure.
get more chickens, or there's things I could do to ramp that up if I weren't working full time.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm not really worried about it. I work with other people. I've built relationships with other people who overproduce beef, who overproduce pork, right?
Sure.
I have certain skills that I can trade for that beef or pork or eggs or whatever it is that I need. And I'd much rather build that community so that I have that system of that interlinking web of people who have skill sets and resources that I don't have because I'm not going to have 100% of everything.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I love reading the Little House on the Prairie books with my kids. And even going back through all of those books, they still they went into town. They, helped out their neighbors. It was never none of them were lone wolf. It was always community.
Yeah. Yeah. Cormac's talking about the Pareto's pencil. I believe I know what he's talking about, and it's actually in my notes. I don't know. I didn't know what to call it though.
Okay.
So Cormac, thank you for that. That's within the falling prey to the self sufficiency idea. Um, there is a really famous economist who riffed on this as well. But the idea of something as simple as a pencil that there's
Oh,
you can't build it yourself,
yeah,
not at
yeah.
least in its current form, right? So the
Right.
graphite comes from one part of the world, it's produced a certain way. The wood comes from another part of the world. The
The
glue is made
eraser,
in,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, the metal. Then all of that ends up culminating into a factory where it then gets assembled. But all of those pieces came from somewhere else. So even the simplest of devices that we use on a day-to-day basis, like a pencil or a pen or whatever, there's no way we could actually produce it on our own. Well, yeah, I can make char and I could scribble something on on some grass that
Yeah,
I chopped up and soaked in water for 2 days and then pressed. But why would I do that when I can go down to the store and purchase something that makes a lot more sense, looks a lot better, instead of taking my entire day to make one page to write a note on,
sure.
right? So when we start relying on other people for their skills and their abilities, we start putting a lot less time into things that aren't very productive and a lot more time into the things that truly are productive for us.
Yeah. No, that's good. Hmm.
And Prismatic says, don't get guinea fowl instead of chickens. Laugh out loud. Ask me how I know. Yeah.
Oh. Ah,
Guinea fowls are not for egg laying production,
no.
or meat generally. I mean, you can eat them and sometimes they poop out an egg, but no, no, not instead of chickens. They have a specific purpose. And that
Yeah.
specific purpose is to eat ticks and make noise.
Yep. That's it. That's funny.
That's great. Yeah, I've personally not had guinea fowl because I don't really want to deal with their noise. But and on that note, just an aside, I guess, is
Mm,
you can get game fowl. So they're chickens, but they're closer to wild chickens, and they can
okay.
fly and get places, and they can do most of what guinea fowl will do as far as eating ticks and things, but they don't make the same noises. They're
Oh,
largely self sufficient. They'll roost up in trees. The biggest issue I've had with them is they can get into your garden, which they're not as prone to do because they can go and eat bugs, and they prefer that when they can. But it's an option. So it's a less domesticated chicken essentially. You can't get eggs out of them sometimes, but they're
mm.
a lot less noisy than guinea hens.
So what about like Muscovies?
Muscovies are great too. Their egg production is a little more hit or miss, so I think they
Erratic,
get,
yeah.
yeah, it's a lot during one season, um, and so they're okay for eggs. You can get some eggs out of them. They're amazing for meat. They're essentially like having red meat, which is pretty cool. They'll raise their own young for the most part if you set them up right.
Right.
So you can have fairly self-sufficient ducks that will find a lot of their own food, raise their own young, and produce meat that basically tastes and functions like beef.
Right.
So they're great and they're quiet. They're fairly docile until you try to pick them up.
Oh,
Yeah.
now they're pretty good around gardens too, aren't they?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Ducks in general are good around gardens because they don't dig and scratch,
Sure.
and uh, they are much more driven to eat like slugs and snails. They're less. Ducks tend to be less. How do I put this? They're not. They don't have the pointy beaks to tear apart your vegetables, and they
Nice.
don't have the. They've got webbed feet that are meant for swimming, not for as much for scratching and tearing things apart. So they tend to
Sure.
be a lot less destructive, and sometimes people will run them through their gardens for a little while to grab snails and slugs and things,
Mm,
as well as fertilize their garden while they're in there. So
right.
um, that is a use that people do. In fact, runner ducks, if you ever see the goofy looking ducks that kind of stand almost straight up,
Yeah.
um, those were developed specifically to run through rice paddies to so they produce eggs, they eliminate pests, and they eat like damaged grain that's on the ground. Um, and so they are bred basically for pest control and egg production in rice paddies, and that's why they stand up like that.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, ducks are, if you ever do an orchard, especially like a permaculture orchard with swales and things, ducks are an amazing addition because they will go through and eat the slugs and snails and other insect life before they'll eat, berries and other things like that.
Ooh,
So they're really good for orchards.
good to know. That's awesome.
Let's see. Prismatic says, I love guinea eggs more than chicken eggs, but they are very stupid in
Undomesticated.
and undomesticated. There we go. Yes, they are. I Prismatic, let me know if you've had success in getting them to lay in a consistent place. My issue with guinea hens is that they tend to find nests all over the place or make nests all over the place, so they're hard to collect eggs for. But a lot of people like other fowl eggs more than chicken eggs. Chicken eggs actually they tend to have a higher water content,
Yeah.
and so duck eggs are better for baking. Um, quail eggs have more flavor, more texture to them.
Yep.
So chicken eggs are kind of the bottom of the heap as far as um, quality for egg,
Yeah.
largely. But
They're just the easiest ones to reliably have access to.
exactly, yep, that's correct.
I mean, think about that. That applies to almost anything. I mean, pine two by fours are not the best building material. It's
Mm-hmm.
just the easiest.
They're cheap and they're
And
easy
they're
and they're consistent, so you can
yep,
slap things together.
yep.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. Chickens. That's a great analogy. Chickens are like like a two by four. I hope
Stupid
somebody
chickens.
hears that out of context and tries to figure it out.
That'd be hilarious. Oh goodness.
Prismatic says guineas will lay in a corner of the coop, but they will
Mhm.
not use the expensive rollaway nest box instead. Yep. Yeah, that tracks. In fact, a lot of times my chickens prefer the corner of the coop, and I'm fine with that. As long as I can find the eggs, I really don't care.
Right. My mom had an engine hoist in her coop, and the chickens like to get up on top of it. It's a long fall for an egg. It
I
made a mess.
can imagine. Yeah, I occasionally will get a hen that like lays at night while she's sleeping.
Oh gosh, yes,
So we'll
right.
just have a splat in the morning.
Mhm.
Yeah, it happens,
Silly
especially as they get
critters.
older.
Oh yeah.
So one of the other things that I see as a common mistake in homesteading is people try to make a profit at homesteading.
Oh,
It's not bad to make a profit. That's a good thing, but don't
sure,
start there, right?
sure.
Um, a lot of people think like I'm going to pay for my homestead by things I sell off of it. And if that were a viable business plan, people would be doing it. And sometimes
Ex
people are.
Yeah. It's one thing to offset your own internal costs,
Mm-hmm.
but it's entirely another thing, to yeah, to expect that to actually turn a profit. because I
Yeah,
mean, there's a lot of money you have to dump into some of these endeavors. Um, and
yeah,
so the ROI can be pretty far out there.
yeah, exactly. I mean, breeding cattle, the stock for, you're looking at 1,500 plus. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the
And what,
very
two
low end.
year, it's got to be a
Yeah,
couple of year ROI on that.
yeah,
Like,
it
yeah.
is. It's a long term investment if you don't have enough space to have your own calves. You know, that's very expensive to bring them in. So you're probably better off doing smaller ruminants. But there's a couple of things that I try to push people towards when they're really thinking that they're going to make a profit on their homestead is one to approach their homestead rather than a profit source as um, a money saving source and a life improvement source. So um, if I did the math really carefully on my chicken eggs, we pay probably a bit less than half. It might be between $1.50 and $2 a dozen for
Okay.
my chicken eggs is about what we pay. That's with really high quality feed. That's with my chickens free ranging in the last hour or two of the day to get a lot of bugs and other things like that. And that's with, I made my chicken coop out of old tin that I pulled off of another roof, and cedars that I cut out of my own forest. So my only cost was about $150 worth of fence. So my costs and my overhead are very, very low. But if I were to go try to buy those eggs, those are not the $5 or $6 eggs you see in the store. Those are $9, $10 eggs you find at specialty shops at,
Right.
maybe. So the quality and what's coming off of my land, plus that's not accounting for, like, I'm not putting a dollar amount on the compost, the huge amounts of compost that my chickens make for me each year and what they're bringing to my property. It's obviously not accommodating for or accounting for the enjoyment I have in my chickens and raising them and the things that my kids learn taking care of animals and all the other benefits, the lower ticks and lower insect rates on my property because of them.
Right.
Um, it also isn't accounting for all the raspberries we've lost to chickens or, things like that. So,
Yeah. You
um,
win some, you lose some.
exactly. But I try to start talking with people who want to make a profit on their homestead to start by reducing their cost. So trying to be as frugal, not cheap, because cheap is expensive in the long run,
Yes.
but
Yes, it
being as
is.
frugal as possible, making wise investments, making little changes over time as you evaluate and observe your property and your systems to to dial in the efficiencies. And then once you've done that, then start you're also improving your quality of living.
Oh
So you
yeah.
should be you should be dialing these systems in so that you're not spinning your wheels, not going crazy, trying to keep up with them. And so that then improves your quality of life. You're getting your hands in the dirt, you're engaging with nature, you're outside, you're breathing good air that's getting better and better because you're improving your property, you're eating better and better food, you're spending less hopefully on medical bills and other similar things like that. And then once you've really built that system, start watching for the niche that you've found that you're really good at. One of my friends and clients is he's now growing turmeric, overwintering turmeric and ginger, which is really cool. I've never
That
seen
is.
anybody do that. And
No.
so he and I kind of talked about how maybe we could do that. He had this idea that maybe he could. And I was like, well, why don't we try it? Let's give it the best shot we can. So we came up with the system and he's tried it and made it work a couple of years in a row now and had really great production. To me, that's his niche, right? Can you buy local turmeric from anybody? Like, I'm not aware of anybody who
I haven't
grows
never
local
seen.
turmeric or
No.
ginger.
Yeah,
Like,
right?
you can get it organic from somebody from Hawaii, but
Yes.
not locally. And there's a lot to be said for how our bodies adapt to our local climate and how things grown in our local climate are better for us. So, I guess my point is find your niche, find something that you do well that other people don't do well. So find something that your property is well suited for that somebody else doesn't want to do
Right.
or can't do as well, and then exploit that niche. Um, you
Yeah,
know,
play to your strengths. I mean, gosh, yeah.
yeah. Like here in Tennessee, I've found that this is a rule of thumb that holds true fairly consistently in the southeast, and that's that the smaller the thing is for the type of thing that it is, the better it tends to do. An example would be smaller peppers,
Ah,
cherry
okay.
tomatoes,
Gotcha.
um, you know, smaller animals, things that grow out faster and are smaller overall, tend to do better in our climate. And I think that's because there's less time for fungal and other moisture related diseases to take hold. There may be some other things going on there, but my point is, full size fruit trees can be very difficult to maintain here, or
Mm,
I should say, like dwarf, cultivated fruit tree varieties can be very difficult to maintain and make produce well. But what I've found on most properties, not all, but most in our general region, is that berries do amazing. And
mhm.
so they're pretty tolerant of varying pHs, with the exception of like blueberries. And they do well in our climate. They produce amazing. They propagate amazingly. And so for a lot of people, berries could be a great niche. Nobody's selling them, or very few people are selling them locally. And
Right.
they're per pound, dollar per pound. They're one of the highest value things you can sell, especially organic, especially beyond organic,
Right.
locally produced.
Right.
Um, so find a niche like that and then exploit that. And you're just basically what you're doing is you're hopefully covering feed costs so that all the things that you're doing to reduce your costs, improve your living, are then also paid for. So they're a net neutral as far as cost. And
Right.
maybe you can grow that over time, but don't go into it expecting to make a huge profit off your homestead.
True, true. Prismatic's got a good niche. I like that, persimmon trees growing and, finishing out pigs. That just sounds
Awesome.
delicious. I
Yeah.
yeah,
We've
I'd
got
eat
to
that.
talk.
Yeah.
Reach out to me on email or something. Just go to my website and find my contact. But maybe we have, I don't know people's online handles a lot of times. Cormac I know because it's his name. But anyways, yeah, Prismatic. Reach out to me and we can talk a bit. But I've actually been um, kind of developing a system that I want to do some videos on and things, of the idea of doing a silvopasture that relies on full-sized fruit and nut trees from seed. So there's certain fruit and nut trees that you can plant from seed, persimmon being one of them.
Mhm.
Um, another would be something like um, I'm trying to think of some of the nuts, and I'm blanking, like shagbark hickory.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of others that oh, apple, Antonovka apple,
I was
which
gonna
you can
say that
graft. Yeah,
yes.
you can graft onto. But anyways, you could graft a late drop apple onto it, an early drop apple, things like that. So you can actually make your silvopasture have all these varied drop times. You can also easily propagate high production mulberries, and so you can fatten your animals off of that, and then you can stack on top of that small swales so that those trees don't really need ongoing water and maintenance, and you're pushing water into your landscape. So you can
Right.
stack all these functions together, and it sounds like Prismatic is already
I was
fitting
gonna
that niche
say,
and doing it.
yeah.
So that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. It's confirms too to me that you can do that, that it's a valid thing. And I think if you
Oh, yeah.
start adding in some additional fodder trees and things beyond just the persimmons, you can give more food throughout the entire season.
Mhm. Anytime I can have a system do something for me is always I'm lazy. I don't wanna do things. I don't wanna have to if I can have my chickens go through and scratch up the manure, awesome. Do that.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's Sepp Holzer, who does not speak English, once
Mm,
said something that roughly translated to, there's a guy who said, but I don't want pigs. And he said, well, if you don't want pigs, you have to do the pig's job,
right.
right? It's the same with chickens, it's the same with anything else. And people generally, the things that people complain about with chickens is they stink and they scratch. Well, give them something to scratch that absorbs all that stink, and
Right.
it won't stink, and they'll be happy.
Hmm.
So give them wood chips. It absorbs that hydrogen, nitrogen. It creates a hydrogen nitrogen bond, gets rid of the smell. The
Yep.
chickens love to dig in it, creates compost, high
Perfect.
nutrient compost. So yeah, the problem is the solution. And if you don't want to do the animal's job, or if you don't want the animal, you're going to have to do the animal's job.
Right.
And chickens, as you put, is a great example of that. So, Jared, have you gotten a chance to look over water flow on your property?
I need to get back into the field. I've got about 2 inches of standing water right now in my field. I can't even walk in the back. The kids have come in. They are just absolutely covered, which is great.
Yeah.
But they're just absolutely covered. So I've definitely got the hillside. I need to get some swales up on that so that I can get my fruit and nut trees in. But yeah, water control is so important because you simultaneously it can be so destructive and is so essential.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a dam that bursts can take out a city below.
Oh, easily.
Yeah. Or, um, or if we don't have water, we'll die.
Mhm.
It's kind of a lie that if you don't have water for 3 days, you'll die. But if you don't have water for three
After day
days,
2, it
yeah.
sucks. I'm just gonna
Oh,
say
yeah.
muscles start locking up. It's no bueno.
Yeah, it depends on the circumstance, right?
Yeah.
If you're sitting at a desk job and you
Oh,
don't
yeah,
have
yeah, yeah.
water for 4 days, it sucks. I'm sure it's, but there's people who will go a week if they don't have a strenuous environment, dry fasting, which is I'm not recommending this, but there are people who have done that. So it you don't it depends on the circumstances. If you're out in the beating sun, in the
Yeah, if
Grand
you're hoofing it,
Canyon for three
yeah, no.
days, yeah, you're not going to make it. So all circumstantial, and it kind of comes back to that idea of understanding nuance, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, water flow on a property is really important.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, whether you have a spring or if it's, dry arid, whether it's high clay where you have lots of runoff,
yep.
it's like, w where is the water? What are you planning on doing with the water? So how do we keep it where you want it?
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, your backfield is what, 2 inches underwater at
Mhm.
the moment.
Yep.
And if you had just moved on the property and you were like, I'm gonna be a cattle farmer, and I'm gonna spend all my money getting set up for cattle farming, and I'm gonna put my barn back here because it's easy to access from the road.
Yep.
It'd be a
Well,
stupid
when we
place for a
bought the
barn,
place,
but
it was dry.
yeah,
Everything back there was dry. Well, you and I walked it.
yeah,
Nope. Nope, not walking it now. Mm-mm.
no, yeah, and so maybe you think about what kind of crops grow really well where it gets really wet part of the year.
Yeah.
Elderberries might be a good, something like that that really loves wet feet, can handle being underwater for a little bit in a floodplain. But
Or
again,
excavating out the back section so that it has a place to go and make myself my pond because I want my pond.
there you go. Yep. Yeah, pond. So yeah, it's playing to the strength of the property rather than. So then, had you not taken the time to actually think about that, watch that, and you just went in and did all the things, you would have had a barn that was underwater for part of the year
Yeah.
rather than realizing that maybe that's the perfect place for a pond and elderberries and raising out some aquaculture or something. So absolutely. And then like you said, catching the water up high, really thinking about the idea of slowing, spreading, and soaking the water, because the hydrological cycle is like a giant solar powered battery.
It is.
Yeah. And if we can store that water higher up on the hill, we have potential energy, whether
Right.
that's just to distribute the water downhill or for something else as well. So,
Well, even you'd made the point I want to say it was on a different podcast about doing your diversion from a water catchment system off of your roof and doing it up higher. Like
Mhm.
that's brilliant. Of course, why not do it higher? Then you have head pressure. Like yes,
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. Because like you put your downspout diverter up near the top of your, right where you're catching the water out of your gutter, rather than right next to your rainwater, your barrel, like all of the diagrams show you to do.
right,
Now you can run that line out, and in fact, I it's one of those projects on my list that hasn't been a huge uh, of huge importance, but I've got a second story downspout that's about 20 feet from my chicken run. And what I plan to do is put a diverter up at the top of that, run a PEX line down into the ground over to that 55-gallon drum that's sitting outside of my chicken run that
right.
has nibbles on the
Yep,
side of it for the chickens, running it up and in because I can run it back up due to the head pressure that I
sure.
have. Now you have to be careful with what's it called, like hydrostatic locking or something, where if you
Yeah,
have air in the line and you go up and down,
yeah.
then it
It'll
gets
hydrolock.
locked.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
hydrolock. Thank you. So you got to keep those things in mind, and it's going to freeze in the winter, so I'm going to put a drain on it because you'll have this U-shaped area that has water in it all the time.
Right.
So again, thinking about the subtleties of design, figuring those things out, and ideally fixing them before beforehand, before you have a major issue with it. But
Sure.
thinking through water is really important.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Do we have any more questions or anything come up on the side there?
Joseph, he just bought a property with a barn. Just had this exact conversation on water catchment with a contractor last week. Awesome. That's
Good.
fantastic.
Well, it sounds like you may have a contractor you want to keep around if they're thinking through these things.
Yeah,
Uh,
unfortunately, that has become a rarity.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. It's so hard to find contractors. I want people I can recommend, and either they like only work in one county,
Oh yeah.
or they're too busy doing something else at high price that they can't talk to you. So yeah,
Yeah. Unfortunately. Cool. Was there anything else that you wanted to cover?
I
Did we hit
think
up
that
all your
pretty much
mistakes?
yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. You know, I'm sure there's some we're missing, but
Oh yes.
those are the big ones that I see people running into is things like taking on too many things at a time,
Yep.
or the opposite, that getting stuck in analysis paralysis kind of
Yep.
thing.
That'd be
So
me.
yep, yeah, it's easy to do. It's easy to get too far to one side or the other, but
Or get so overwhelmed by looking at YouTube and Instagram and the perfection that you see there to like, oh, well, I can't achieve that because I don't have that infrastructure. I don't have that, whatever to not even get started. It's like, no, no, no. For one, they're probably lying.
right.
And you'll get there eventually. Don't worry.
What do you think of doing a podcast entirely on troubleshooting?
That'd be great. I would
Yeah.
love that.
Is that
The
something you
nerd in me.
yeah. I mean your brain works in a way that I would suspect that you have actually put legitimate time into thinking through that. Am I right on that?
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah. So yeah, I've got, 15 plus years as a biomedical engineering technician. So like I didn't spend a singular day that I wasn't diagnosing network connectivity or, whatever system it was, whether it's a sterilizer, an x-ray machine, whatever it was. I had to figure out what it was doing that it shouldn't do or what it wasn't doing that it should do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that'd be a really good conversation. I think we
That'd be
should
fun.
tackle that soon. So,
Cool.
um I think we're getting close to the end here. Jared, do you think you could tell everybody what you do, what your business is, where they can find you, all that?
Sure. So my business is Resilient Living. You can find me at resilientliving.com. That's LIVIN.com. We sell preparedness equipment. I've got knives and clothes and books, lots of books. I love my books. Um,
They're good books too.
they're good books. Yes, they've been
Yeah.
vetted. Ryan vetted them. Um, well, honestly, there are a lot of those books are books that I grew up on. I grew up, having the country living encyclopedia. I grew up with the Foxfire books. If I could find those and they didn't cost an arm and a leg, I'd have those.
I think I
Um,
sent you those in PDF, but that's
yes,
an
yes, you
aside.
did. I appreciated that. So yeah, anyway, so yeah, you can follow us. We're on Instagram, on Facebook, and TikTok. I haven't really put much out on TikTok yet, but we'll get there.
Yeah, cool. Well, and this is something I like to say because I've been in Jared's shop multiple times now, and I think of it as being like the ultimate curated selection of like homestead and preparedness stuff.
I
Um,
appreciate that.
yeah, because you're meticulous about research, and so it's like if you know the like I read this book so you didn't have to kind of thing.
Right?
If you go to Jared's shop or Jared's website, it's the like I researched the crap out of this thing so you don't have to.
Yeah,
And
that
he's
that
really
that's
good about that.
that's kind of what I do. That's what I spend my day doing is like, well, what can I sell that because I want to be able to stand on whatever it is that I'm doing. And so I can stand firm on like, no, I've actually looked into this. I know these companies. It's a short list,
Mhm.
because I've got to find companies that will work with me and sell a good product at a reasonable cost. It's a short list.
Yes, a very short list.
So my shop's not too big, but it's got good stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, I love your selection of various things and how carefully curated that is. So, anyways, my name is Ryan Steva. I am the Homestead Consultant, which is me just basically making a business name out of what I do. um,
Right?
to make it as simple as possible. It's kind of on the nose, but makes it easy for people to find me. So my website is thehomesteadconsultant.com. I help people avoid big mistakes like we talked about today in setting up homesteads, as well as really polish off what they're doing on their homestead already. I do a lot of custom technical stuff is a bit of my specialty. Um, you can find me at thehomesteadconsultant.com. I also have a YouTube channel, and pretty much my handle on all social is some form of the Homestead Consultant. You can find me there. So, if you
Yep.
guys, this is just something to throw out at the end. If you guys see this video later and have recommendations or for show ideas or things that you'd love to see Jared and I talk about, we'll probably do it. So throw those suggestions in the comments.
Heck yeah.
We'll try to get to them if we can. And thank you, Joseph, Prismatic, and Cormac, and everybody else for being here for this, for our first live podcast. It's actually been a lot of fun, and
Yeah.
we've really enjoyed having people. We didn't expect anybody to watch
Nope,
this,
did
so
not.
to be honest, the fact that we got a single comment was a bit of a shock to me. So thank you all for being here.
Heck yeah. Alrighty. Have a good evening.
See you guys.
See ya.